He defeated her mate in combat. Now she is his concubine by custom. This planet belonged to the Viorlian clans, a proud warrior people known across the galaxy for their strict honor laws and ancient customs. Commander Elias Rowe stood inside the main hall of the orbital citadel. The chamber was wide and open, built from dark stone and metal grown from the planet itself. Tall banners hung from the walls, each marked with clan symbols shaped like claws and suns. Alien guards stood in perfect lines, holding long polearms that hummed softly with power. Elias kept his hands behind his back. He wore a simple human uniform unarmed by Viorlian standards. He was not tall compared to them, nor wide. Many of the aliens saw him as fragile. That was their first mistake. The meeting had begun as planned. Words of peace, trade routes. Mutual defense. Humanity wanted friendship, not conflict, but the Viorlians did not trust words alone. At the center of the hall stood Warlord Keithrax, a massive figure covered in layered armor. His 4 eyes burned with sharp focus as he studied Elias. Beside him stood a Viorlian woman, tall and strong, her armor marked with silver lines. She was Valera, bonded partner to Keithrax by clan law. Keithrax spoke, his voice deep and echoing. "Humans speak of peace," he said, "yet your fleets grow larger every cycle. You say you are not conquerors, prove it." Elias met his gaze calmly. "We grow because the galaxy is dangerous, we protect our own, we respect others." A low rumble passed through the hall. Some Viorlians clicked their teeth, a sign of doubt. Keithrax stepped forward. "In our law, words mean nothing without trial. If your kind wishes equal standing, you will face me in combat." The human delegation froze. Combat was never part of the agreement. Elias could feel their fear behind him. One wrong move could mean war. The Viorlian council waited in silence. Elias took a slow breath. He had studied their customs carefully. Refusal would be seen as weakness. Weakness would invite attack. "I accept," Elias said. A sharp sound filled the hall. Shock rippled through the Viorlians. Even Valera turned her head slightly, studying him with new interest. Keithrax gave a cruel smile. "Then you will die with honor." The duel was set for the same cycle. Viorlians respected no delay when honor was challenged. The arena lay beneath the citadel, carved into the living rock. Rows of stone seats rose in a circle around a wide combat floor. Light came from glowing veins in the walls, painting the space in red and gold. Elias stood at one end of the arena. He wore light armor designed for movement, not strength. In his hand was a simple staff, approved by Viorlian law as a neutral weapon. Across from him stood Keithrax, armed with a heavy blade and reinforced plating. He was larger, stronger, and trained from birth for battle. The crowd roared. Valera watched from the high seat beside the elders. Her expression was controlled, but her hands were clenched. She had seen many duels. She had never seen a challenger survive against Keithrax. A horn sounded. Keithrax charged. The ground shook with each step. He swung his blade in a wide arc meant to end the fight instantly. Elias moved aside at the last moment, feeling the wind of the strike pass his chest. Gasps echoed. Elias did not meet strength with strength. He watched, waited, learned. He used the arena itself, forcing Keithrax to turn, to overreach, to waste energy. The duel stretched on. Sweat formed on Keithrax's armor. His strikes grew heavier, slower. Elias struck only when needed. A hit to the knee joint, a sweep that sent Keithrax stumbling. Each move was careful, controlled. The crowd grew quiet. Keithrax roared in anger and rushed again. Elias planted his staff and twisted, using the warlord's own weight against him. Keithrax fell hard to the stone floor. Before he could rise, Elias stood over him, staff pressed against the armor's weak point. The arena fell into complete silence. By Viorlian law, the duel was decided. Keithrax looked up, disbelief filling his eyes. He tried to speak, but his strength failed. His breath slowed. The elders raised their hands. "It is done," one declared. Medics rushed forward, but it was too late. The warlord had fallen. Elias stepped back, his face pale. He had not wanted this outcome, but the law had been clear: combat to yield or end. Valera rose slowly from her seat. Her world had just shattered. She walked down into the arena, her steps steady despite the storm inside her. She stood before Elias, her posture straight. The elder spoke again, voice echoing. "By ancient custom, the bonded partner of the fallen is transferred under the protection and authority of the victor." A murmur spread through the crowd. Valera lowered her head, not in submission, but in acknowledgement of law. "I am bound," she said quietly. Elias felt the weight of the words hit him like a blow. "I did not ask for this," he said at once. The elder tilted his head. "Custom does not require desire, only outcome." Elias looked at Valera. He saw no fear in her eyes, only resolve and deep pain. "This is wrong," he said firmly. "She is not a prize." The Violins stirred, some growled, others watched with curiosity. "Human," the elder warned, "to reject the custom is to reject our law." Elias straightened. "Then hear me clearly. I will honor your law in spirit, not cruelty. She will not be harmed, she will not be treated as property." Valera's eyes flickered just slightly. The council exchanged looks. This was not expected. Humans were supposed to claim victory fully. That was how strength was shown. Finally, the elder spoke. "So noted. The bond stands, its form remains to be seen." The crowd slowly dispersed. Whispers followed Elias and Valera as they left the arena together, not side by side, but not apart either. Later, inside a quiet chamber, Valera stood near the wall. Elias remained by the door, keeping distance. "I will not command you," Elias said. "I will not control you. This bond was forced by law, not by my will." Valera studied him carefully. "Among my people," she said, "victors take what they earn. Mercy is rare." Elias nodded. "Among mine, strength means choosing restraint." Silence filled the room. Outside, the galaxy watched. News of the duel spread fast. A human had defeated a Violin warlord. Customs had been triggered, laws questioned, and something far greater had begun. The silence of the chamber pressed heavily on both Elias and Valera. The weight of the duel's outcome lingered like smoke, filling every corner. Outside, the red sun of Cardal cast sharp streaks across the citadel's walls, painting everything in shades of fire and metal. Though the duel had ended, the consequences had only just begun. Valera's eyes were fixed on the floor. She had stood before the human victor and accepted the ancient law, but her mind raced with questions and doubts. Every Violin knew the law well. The bonded partner of a fallen warrior was claimed by the victor. No one could refuse. And yet this human, so small in build, so quiet in demeanor, refused to act like a conqueror. That refusal unsettled her far more than force ever could. Elias remained calm, though inside he felt a storm. He had trained for combat, for diplomacy, and for negotiation, but never for the responsibility that the Violin law had thrust upon him. He had defeated Keithrax, but victory did not bring pride or joy. It brought a human duty he neither wanted nor understood fully. "I need to understand your ways," Elias said, breaking the silence. "If I am to honor the law, I must understand the meaning behind it." Valera looked at him sharply. "Meaning? The meaning is clear," she replied. "The victor proves strength. The fallen's partner demonstrates loyalty by joining the victor." Her voice was steady, but there was a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "You do not follow the way of our people. You do not take what you have won." "I do not believe strength lies in taking from another," Elias said gently. "It lies in protecting and ensuring life continues without needless suffering. I will honor the law, but not cruelty, not domination." Valera's expression hardened. She had expected arrogance, pride, or even scorn. Instead, she found only thoughtfulness and restraint. It irritated her more than any insult could. She had been trained to obey, to respect strength, to fear none. Yet here stood a human who dared to bend the rules with words rather than force. The tension between them grew as they began the first steps of their forced alliance. Valera was bound by law to follow Elias' lead in formal settings, yet she resisted his influence at every turn. She tested him constantly, asking questions in sharp tones, observing his reactions, and probing the limits of his patience. "You are human," she said once, her voice cutting like a blade, "yet you refuse the instincts of your own kind. Why?" Elias considered his answer carefully. "Because instincts alone are not enough. Strength without understanding is chaos. Humanity has survived not because we dominate, but because we adapt and choose wisely." Valera tilted her head, skeptical. "And you expect me to believe that is strength?" "I do," Elias replied firmly. "Strength is not just winning a fight. It is knowing when to fight, when to hold back, and when to protect others. That is what I showed Keithrax in the arena." She did not respond immediately. Instead, she studied him as one might study an unfamiliar animal, careful, cautious, and searching for weakness. Her mind was a battlefield. On one side, she clung to the traditions of her people, traditions that had shaped her every thought and action. On the other side, she faced a human who challenged everything she believed. Over the next cycles, Elias and Valera were forced to navigate the delicate balance of alien law. They attended councils together, their presence side by side signaling that the duel had been honored. To the Virelians, this human had claimed more than just victory. He had claimed respect by refusing cruelty. Some whispered that he was wise beyond his years, while others feared he might manipulate the law to humanity's advantage. Valera noticed the whispers. It unsettled her. She was used to clarity. The world of Virelian law was simple: obey, submit, or challenge. But this human created uncertainty. He did not command her, yet she found herself observing him constantly, noting his decisions, his reactions, and his subtle gestures. One evening they walked along the edge of the citadel, overlooking the jagged mountains and the swirling crimson clouds. The wind was sharp, carrying the scent of the planet's minerals and distant storms. Valera kept her distance, yet her curiosity overcame caution. "You are patient," she said finally. "You allow me freedom even though I am bound by law. Why?" Elias looked at the horizon. "Because forcing you would break the spirit of the law, not honor it. A law is meant to guide, not to create fear. I will follow the custom, but only in the way that keeps both of us alive and respected." Valera's eyes narrowed. "You speak like a teacher, but you are not one of us. You do not understand what it means to be a Virelian. You do not know the bond of loyalty, the pride of submission, the fear of dishonor." "Then teach me," Elias said simply. "Teach me your ways, and I will respect them." For a moment, Valera considered striking him, testing his courage as warriors did in informal duels. But she did not. There was something about him, something unlike any Virelian she had met. He did not seek to dominate, yet he did not bend. He was strong, yet restrained. And in that paradox lay power she could not deny. The days that followed were a delicate dance. In councils, Elias learned the intricacies of Virelian law, asking questions, challenging interpretations respectfully, and observing customs in detail. Valera assisted him, sometimes reluctantly, offering explanations, historical context, and subtle warnings about potential pitfalls. She was proud of her knowledge, but she also found herself learning from him. His patience, his calm, and his ability to think beyond immediate conflict were unlike anything she had encountered. One night, Valera approached him privately. The halls of the citadel were quiet, only the hum of energy from the walls echoing softly. She did not speak immediately, only watching him as he reviewed the council's records. "You follow the law as you see fit," she said. "You bend it to your own understanding, yet you remain honest." Elias looked up, meeting her gaze. "Honesty is the only way to survive among those who see strength as dominance. You must trust in your own judgment, Valera. I will not force you. I will not deceive you. That is my way of honoring the law." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Your way is strange." "It may not last. Perhaps," he said, "but it is true, and truth has power even the strongest blade cannot match." Valera studied him, recognizing the truth in his words even as she resisted it. For the first time, she saw humans not as fragile, inferior beings, but as unpredictable, capable, and wise. Their victory in the arena had been physical, but their strength in restraint, in thought, and in understanding had shaken her deeply. As cycles passed, the bond of custom forced them into shared responsibilities. They attended diplomatic meetings together, oversaw ceremonial events, and navigated political tensions with the council. Valera's presence was constant, yet Elias never treated her as a possession. Slowly, the other Virelians began to notice the difference. A human could honor the law without cruelty. A human could command respect without fear. This, more than anything, unsettled the traditionalists. Some whispered that humans were dangerous not because they wielded power, but because they understood it in ways the Virelians did not. Others were curious, wondering if this small, calm man could truly navigate a society built on strength, loyalty, and combat without succumbing to the expected violence. One day, Valera spoke quietly, almost as if to herself. "Perhaps your people are not like us, and perhaps that is why you are dangerous. You do not break, you do not yield, you adapt, you choose." Elias regarded her with respect. "Choice is the greatest strength any being can have. It allows us to survive, to grow, and to protect others. It does not matter if one is human or Virelian. The principle is the same." Valera turned her gaze to the horizon again. She had always believed that submission and obedience defined strength. Now she began to question everything. Her mind, once rigid with tradition, felt like it was expanding, and the truth unsettled her. Humans were not just strong in body, they were strong in thought, in spirit, in moral resolve. And she had been forced by law and circumstance to recognize it. The chapter of duel and bond was over, but a deeper story had begun. Elias and Valera were bound not by desire, but by custom. Yet in that binding, a fragile, uncertain respect was forming. Each learned from the other, each tested the limits of law and culture, each discovered a strength previously unimagined. And beyond the citadel, beyond the crimson mountains and storm-swept plains, the galaxy watched. Humanity's methods, strange and restrained, had already begun to shift the perception of an entire warrior race. A human had not only defeated a warlord, but had also forced an alien people to rethink the meaning of strength, honor, and choice. Valera felt it too, though she would never admit it openly. The human before her, small and unassuming, had changed everything she had known. And whether she liked it or not, the world she had believed in so firmly was no longer certain. The bond neither of them had chosen was the beginning of a journey that would reshape laws, challenge traditions, and test the very limits of honor. And in the quiet moments, away from the gaze of council and clan, both of them understood one truth. This alliance, forced, awkward, and unexpected, was more powerful than any duel, more significant than any law, and more dangerous to the pride of a warrior than 1,000. Battles, the days passed slowly on Cartel, yet for Elias Rowe and Valera, each moment was heavy with tension. The duel had ended, the ancient law had been acknowledged, and yet nothing felt settled. Outside, the red sun dipped behind jagged mountains, casting long shadows over the citadel. Inside, the halls were alive with whispers. Every Virelian guard, elder, and council member seemed to watch them, waiting for a misstep. Elias moved through the citadel with quiet purpose. Every meeting, every ceremonial task reminded him that his victory carried consequences far beyond the arena. He had not merely defeated Kithrax, he had disrupted centuries of custom. In doing so, he had claimed Valera under the law, but his mind revolted against treating her as property. Valera, too, struggled. The weight of her people's expectations pressed upon her like armor. She was trained to obey, to accept fate with dignity, and to honor the law of the fallen warrior. Yet this human, the victor, refused to dominate. Instead, he offered restraint, patience, and careful observation. That in itself was a challenge more formidable than any duel. "You continue to ignore your instincts," Valera said sharply one morning as they walked along the citadel's high walkways, overlooking the crimson plains. Her tone was not accusatory, yet it carried the force of her warrior heritage. "Your people would have claimed everything demanded obedience. You have not." Elias glanced at her, careful not to falter under her gaze. "And yet your people respect me," he said. "Not for my strength, but because I followed the law in spirit. They see that I am fair, not cruel. That earns respect, even among those who value power above all else." Valera frowned, her 4 eyes narrowing. "Respect is not enough. Among Virelians, strength is proven through dominance. Mercy is weakness disguised." "Perhaps," Elias admitted, "but I have learned that strength also lies in control, control over oneself, over one's choices, and over the chaos that comes from thoughtless action. I will not harm you. I will not use this bond to command you. That is my choice. It is my honor." Valera studied him, realizing that he truly believed in his own words. And in that belief there was power, quiet, measured, and impossible to ignore. Their journey through the political landscape of Cartel was only beginning. The council had accepted the outcome of the duel, yet whispers of doubt spread among the clans. Some viewed Elias' restraint as clever manipulation, others as dangerous defiance. To the Virelians, a human who refused to claim his full victory challenged not only custom, but the very foundation of their society. One council session grew particularly tense. The chamber was vast, lined with statues of warriors from centuries past. The elders sat on high platforms, observing the proceedings with sharp eyes. Elias stood beside Valera, aware of every murmur, every flicker of movement. "You have disrupted the law," an elder said, voice echoing across the hall. "The victor must claim the bonded partner fully as tradition demands. You have done otherwise." Elias responded calmly, "I have honored the spirit of your law, I have not broken it. The outcome of the duel stands, the bond is recognized. But cruelty is not required by the law, and I will not enact it. Murmurs filled the chamber. Some elders shook their heads in disbelief. Others leaned forward, intrigued by this human's logic. Valera could feel the tension radiating from the council. Every word she spoke or withheld carried weight. Every movement she made reflected on both of them. "You risk misunderstanding," Valera said quietly, her voice firm but controlled. "Do not mistake restraint for weakness. The law allows for honor, yes, but to bend it so is dangerous. To your people this may be wisdom, to ours it is a test." Elias met her gaze, understanding the duality of her warning. "I accept the test. I do not seek to dominate, but to understand. That is all I ask of this bond." Valera's eyes softened just slightly. She had never encountered a being who did not seek to claim advantage in a victory. He was unlike any warrior she had met, and that difference unsettled her more than any threat. In the following days, they faced constant scrutiny. Every action, every word was observed by the council and the people. The smallest misstep could ignite a political storm. Yet amidst this tension, they began to rely on each other in subtle ways. Valera guided Elias through ceremonial protocols, showing him where deference was expected and where independence was respected. Elias, in turn, shared perspectives on diplomacy, negotiation, and the value of measured choice over brute force. Their alliance began to attract attention beyond the citadel. Neighboring clans sent envoys to observe this human and the Virelian woman who accompanied him. Stories spread that Elias Rowe had defeated a warlord, yet refused to claim dominance fully. That he treated the bonded partner with respect rather than command. And that the woman, Valera, had not resisted his guidance but had learned from it, even as she tested his limits constantly. One evening, they found themselves alone on the cliffs overlooking the storm-swept plains. Lightning arced across the distant mountains, illuminating the jagged terrain in sudden brilliance. Valera stood silently, watching the tempest. "Your way is strange," she said softly. "Among my people, such restraint would be seen as indecision, yet you survive." Elias nodded. "Strength is not only measured in victory or conquest, it is measured in choice, in restraint, in knowing the difference between dominance and protection." Valera turned to him, her eyes sharp. "And yet you claim to honor our law. How can that be? You bend it to your own understanding. That is not honor, it is something else." "Perhaps it is a new understanding," Elias said calmly. "One that honors the law's purpose rather than its rigid form. The law exists to maintain order, to protect the living, to ensure fairness. If the law is twisted into cruelty, it fails its purpose. I will follow the law's spirit, not just its letter." For a long moment, Valera said nothing. She had been trained to accept law without question, to obey custom without thought. Yet here was a human who understood the law better than many Virelians, who interpreted it with wisdom rather than fear. It unsettled her deeply. The next council session brought an unexpected challenge. A rival faction within the Virelians accused Elias of undermining tradition. They demanded a formal trial to evaluate his adherence to the law. The accusation was serious. Failure could ignite political unrest or even war. Valera's heart tightened. She knew the trial would force both of them into the public eye, testing their resolve and their understanding of honor. Yet she also recognized that the human beside her was prepared. Elias did not falter under pressure. He approached the challenge with calm clarity, presenting his actions as aligned with the law's spirit while respecting its intent. During the trial, witnesses spoke of his restraint, his respect for Valera, and his careful observation of custom. Each word reinforced the notion that strength could exist without cruelty. Valera found herself speaking in his defense, a role she had never imagined. Her words were precise, logical, and passionate, illustrating how his actions honored the law in ways many Virelians had failed to understand. The council deliberated long into the night. Finally, the elders delivered their verdict. Elias' interpretation of the law was accepted, and the bond remained intact. The rival faction seethed, but the decision stood. Valera exhaled, a quiet relief passing through her. She had defended the human, had acknowledged his wisdom, and in doing so had begun to question the rigid beliefs that had guided her entire life. Walking back through the quiet halls, she glanced at Elias. "Perhaps your way is stronger than mine," she admitted softly. "Not because you defeat with force, but because you survive with choice." Elias nodded, aware of the unspoken acknowledgement between them. The bond forced by law had begun to transform into something far more profound, a connection built on respect, understanding, and cautious trust. Beyond the citadel, beyond the crimson mountains and storm-laden plains, Cardle itself seemed to shift. The galaxy had begun to notice humanity's approach, not through conquest or intimidation, but through thought, strategy, and moral strength. A human had entered a world ruled by warriors and honor, and his presence was already reshaping expectations. Valera knew that more challenges would come. Political pressures, rival factions, and cultural misunderstandings would test them both. Yet she also knew that she had learned something invaluable from this human, something no battle could teach. Strength was not only in the body or in victory. It was in the mind, the heart, and the ability to act with purpose beyond immediate instinct. And for the first time, she began to wonder whether her people's understanding of honor, loyalty, and law might need to change. The bond between Ilias and Valera, forced by law and circumstance, had become a crucible for new understanding. Each step they took together, each challenge they faced, brought them closer to a truth neither had expected. That strength, respect, and honor could coexist, even in the most unlikely of alliances. The storm outside the citadel raged with a fury that mirrored the tension inside. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the jagged peaks of Cardle, while the wind carried the scent of metal and ozone. Within the stone walls, the air was tense, filled with whispers, glances, and the quiet anticipation of challenge. Ilias Rowe and Valera moved through the corridors with measured steps, aware that the next hours would test not just their alliance, but the fragile understanding they had built. A rival faction within the Virelian Council had grown restless. They had accepted Ilias' restraint in the duel's aftermath, but some elders and warriors refused to see mercy as strength. Rumors of human cunning and the unnatural bond with Valera had spread through the clans like wildfire. Now they demanded a formal trial to judge Ilias' honor and his adherence to Virelian law. The trial was to be held in the Arena of Ancestors, a vast circular hall carved into the living stone of Cardle's mountains. Statues of legendary warriors watched from their pedestals, their cold eyes seeming to judge the living. The arena was a place of history where the deeds of centuries were recorded and where truth, strength, and honor were weighed with precision. Ilias and Valera stood at the center of the arena. Around them, the council assembled with stern faces. The rival faction stepped forward, their leader, a tall Virelian named Tharian, speaking first. His voice echoed across the hall. "Human," he said, "you have disrupted our laws. You claim victory over a warlord, yet you do not claim his bonded partner in full. You manipulate our customs for your own ends. Today, the council demands that your actions be judged. You must prove your honor according to the ways of Cardle or face consequences." Ilias bowed his head slightly, acknowledging the challenge. "I accept. I am here to show that honor can be maintained even without cruelty, and that the law's purpose is greater than its rigidity." Valera stepped forward beside him, her presence strong and unwavering. "I speak in his defense," she said. "He has followed the law, not its letter alone, but its spirit. He has protected me as the law intends without dishonor. He has upheld what many of my people have failed to understand." A murmur passed through the crowd. Some elders were impressed, others were irritated. Valera had never spoken so openly in defense of a human, and yet her words carried weight, the authority of a warrior who understood both law and combat. The trial began with questions from the council. They asked Ilias about his motivations, his decisions in the duel, and his approach to the bond. Every answer was precise, measured, and rooted in both principle and respect for Virelian law. He explained that strength was not only in dominance, but in restraint, choice, and the protection of life. He emphasized that honoring the law meant respecting its purpose, not merely following its rules blindly. Tharian sneered, his 4 eyes narrowing. "Words are easy. Action is harder. You claim understanding, yet you have not demonstrated the strength required by our customs. Do you expect us to accept your philosophy over the deeds of a warrior?" Ilias nodded. "Actions are important, yes, but the measure of a warrior is also in judgment. I defeated Keithrax in combat. That is action. I followed the law by claiming his bonded partner. That is action. How I treat her, that is choice, not weakness. That is also action." Valera stepped forward again. "He has shown courage not only in combat but in thought. He has upheld honor in a way few of our people could. If your definition of strength requires cruelty, then you fail to see the law's purpose. The council conferred quietly. Tharion's faction was vocal in protest, but the elders who valued wisdom and foresight recognized the truth in Valera's words. The human had not weakened, he had reframed. He had maintained law, honored custom, and preserved life, but the trial was not yet over. Tharion demanded a demonstration of skill, a test that would prove Elias' ability to uphold the law under pressure. A series of controlled duels was arranged, each designed to challenge him in combat, strategy, and judgment. Yet unlike the arena of Kithrax, these trials were not solely about physical strength. They tested fairness, decision-making, and the protection of others. In the first trial, Elias faced 3 seasoned warriors in succession. Each attempted to exploit his size and human build, yet Elias relied on agility, strategy, and observation. He disarmed and neutralized them without causing lasting harm, respecting the rules of engagement and demonstrating control. The Virelians watched in astonishment. The second trial involved Valera herself, who acted as a partner rather than an opponent. Together, they faced a complex simulated scenario requiring quick decision-making and coordinated action. Elias deferred to Valera's knowledge of tactics while contributing his own insights, blending human strategy with Virelian tradition. The result was a flawless execution that impressed even the harshest critics. The final test was a mock council session where Elias had to negotiate the release of a captured territory without resorting to intimidation or threat. Here, his understanding of law, diplomacy, and honor was judged. He spoke calmly, acknowledged the rights of all parties, and guided the negotiation toward a fair resolution. The Virelians saw that his strength was not only physical, but intellectual and moral as well. As the trials concluded, the council deliberated. The chamber was filled with tense silence. Valera stood beside Elias, her posture firm, yet her mind reflected the struggle she had witnessed. The human had demonstrated everything the Virelians valued, and yet in a way that challenged their deepest assumptions. Finally, the eldest of the council spoke. His voice echoed, resonant and final. Elias Rowe, human of Earth, you have been tested in combat, in judgment, and in adherence to the law. You have demonstrated restraint, wisdom, and honor. You have respected our customs while maintaining the integrity of your own principles. We recognize that the bond with Valera has been honored, and your actions reflect true strength. Tharion's eyes blazed with anger, but he remained silent. The verdict was clear. The human had passed, and in doing so, he had shifted the understanding of honor among the Virelians. Valera exhaled, a mixture of relief and newfound respect filling her chest. She had defended Elias, witnessed his capabilities, and recognized his wisdom. The bond that began as forced obligation had transformed into a foundation of mutual respect. Outside the chamber, the citizens of Cardal began to whisper of the unprecedented trial. Stories spread quickly across the planet and beyond. Humanity's approach, combining strength with restraint, victory with fairness, was remarkable even among a warrior society. Valera walked beside Elias along the citadel's corridors after the trial. The storm outside had passed, leaving a quiet, eerie calm. Lightning still illuminated distant peaks, but the danger had shifted from physical to political, and both of them understood that vigilance was required. You have changed their understanding of law, Valera said quietly. Few could do what you have done. Few could survive the scrutiny, the challenge, and the expectations. Elias nodded. And yet, I am not done learning. I must continue to respect your ways, to understand them, and to act with honor. That is the only way this bond can work for both of us. Valera's eyes softened just slightly. Perhaps humans are more than I believed. Perhaps strength is not only in dominance, but in the courage to act with purpose and restraint. For the first time, the rigid warrior within her began to bend, opening to the possibility that honor could exist without cruelty. That respect could be earned not through fear, but through understanding and choice. And for Elias, the trial had taught him more than he expected. Humanity's ways, adaptable, thoughtful, and principled, could survive even in a world built on rigid combat and tradition. He realized that the bond with Valera, though forced by law, had become a bridge between cultures. It was fragile, uncertain, yet powerful, a living example of what cooperation and respect could achieve. The bond neither of them had chosen now carried new meaning. Beyond obligation, beyond duty lay possibility. The possibility that two very different worlds could find common ground, that honor could evolve, and that strength could take forms beyond the mere swing of a blade. And as the crimson sun set behind the jagged mountains, casting long shadows across the citadel, Elias and Valera walked together, not as victor and bound partner, but as allies, observers, and cautious learners of one another's worlds. The galaxy watched, and in that quiet observation, a new understanding began to form. That humans, though few in number, could challenge ancient traditions not with overwhelming force, but with thought, restraint, and courage. And that realization would ripple far beyond Cartel, shaping alliances and respect in ways few could yet imagine. The citadel of Cartel was quiet in the early morning. Crimson light filtered through the high windows, casting long streaks across polished stone floors. Outside, the jagged mountains glowed faintly as the first rays of the sun struck their peaks. Inside, the halls were still, but the air was thick with anticipation. Today, decisions would be made that could change the future of the clans and of humanity's presence among them. Elias Rowe walked beside Valera through the corridors, their footsteps echoing softly. Since the trial of honor, much had changed. The rival faction had been forced to reconsider their position, their arguments against the human defeated not by force, but by the undeniable logic and respect shown in the arena and council. Even Tharian had grown silent, watching Elias with a mixture of suspicion and reluctant admiration. Valera's gaze was fixed ahead, yet her mind worked quickly, considering every possibility, every implication of what had occurred. Her people had long valued strength above all else, and yet here was a human, small by Virelian standards, who had earned respect through wisdom, judgment, and moral courage. That fact unsettled her more than any duel ever could. "The council will convene again today," Valera said softly. "They will decide on the new interpretation of the bond. Your actions have set precedent, human. What you do next will shape how our people see humans for cycles to come." Elias nodded. "I understand. I do not seek personal power or reward. I only wish to uphold the law in a way that is honorable and just." Valera turned to him, her expression unreadable. "That is what makes you different and dangerous." "Not to me," she added quickly, "but to those who cannot understand a mind that does not follow tradition blindly." Their journey to the council chamber was met with quiet attention. Citizens of Cartel lined the halls, observing the unusual pairing of human and Virelian warrior. Some whispered with curiosity, others with caution. Stories of the duel, the bond, and the trial had spread rapidly. Humans, they realized, were not merely physical beings. They were clever, adaptable, and capable of principles that rivaled even the greatest Virelian minds. The council chamber itself was a place of majesty and history. Statues of legendary warriors loomed over the assembly, silent witnesses to centuries of tradition. The chamber was filled with elders, council members, and representatives of the clans. Tharian and his supporters sat stiffly, eyes fixed on Elias, expecting some flaw, some weakness. Elias and Valera entered together. Silence fell. The council's eldest rose, his voice echoing through the hall. "Elias Rowe, human of Earth," he said. "You have been tested in combat, in judgment, and in adherence to our law. Your victories are known, your restraint has been observed, and your bond with Valera, formerly the partner of warlord Kethrax, has been maintained without dishonor." Elias bowed his head slightly. "I have only sought to honor the law and respect her life as your customs intend." The eldest nodded. "Yet your methods are unorthodox. They challenge our assumptions of strength and honor. The council must decide how this bond will be recognized going forward and how your example will shape our laws." Tharian rose, his 4 eyes flashing. "This human bends our law to suit himself. He undermines tradition and risks our unity. He should be removed from our lands or the bond annulled." Valera stood quickly. "Enough," she said, her voice carrying authority that surprised even herself. "Elias has not broken the law. He has upheld it better than many of our own. He has honored me, protected me, and preserved the spirit of our customs. To deny this is to deny the purpose of our law itself." A murmur passed through the chamber. Some council members whispered in agreement, others looked uncomfortable. But Valera's words carried the weight of her status, her knowledge, and her honor. Even Tharian fell silent, unable to dispute the truth in front of so many witnesses. The eldest deliberated briefly before speaking again. The council recognizes that the bond between Elias Rowe and Valera is legitimate under the law. Furthermore, it shall serve as a precedent. Strength may be demonstrated through courage, wisdom, and protection, not only through dominance or cruelty. The interpretation of the bond is hereby revised. A wave of astonishment and approval passed through the chamber. Citizens whispered, some clapped quietly, and even rival factions nodded in reluctant acknowledgement. Humanity had set a new standard, one that combined strength, respect, and understanding. Valera exhaled, a mixture of relief and admiration passing over her features. She turned to Elias. "You have changed more than law," she said quietly. "You have changed how my people see strength and honor." Elias smiled faintly. "And you have taught me about courage, loyalty, and the weight of responsibility. I could not have done this alone." The council adjourned, leaving Elias and Valera alone in the high halls. They walked together, their steps steady, yet the bond between them now felt different. It was no longer merely law or custom. It was respect, trust, and cautious understanding. Over the following cycles, the effects of Elias' victory and restraint continued to ripple through Cartel. Trade agreements were honored with honesty, not intimidation. Diplomacy became more thoughtful, and the clans began to reevaluate their understanding of strength. Stories of the human and the Virelian woman spread across the planet, inspiring younger warriors to consider that honor could exist without cruelty. Valera found herself changing as well. Her mind, once rigid with tradition, now embraced the possibility of choice, collaboration, and mutual respect. She learned from Elias that strength was not only in combat, but in wisdom, judgment, and moral courage. And though she would never admit it openly, she began to feel a quiet respect and trust for the human who had defeated her mate yet treated her with dignity. Elias, too, felt the transformation. He realized that humans could not only survive in a world of warriors, but could thrive, earning respect without intimidation. The bond with Valera, once a symbol of law and obligation, had become a bridge between worlds, a living example of what cooperation, respect, and understanding could achieve. One evening, they stood together on the Citadel's highest terrace, looking out over the jagged mountains and storm-swept plains. The sky was clear, the red sun casting its last rays before dipping below the horizon. "The galaxy is watching," Valera said softly. "Your actions have changed how humans are seen here, and not just here, the clans will carry stories of you across the stars." Elias nodded. "I hope they remember that strength is not just in victory. It is in the choices we make and in the respect we show to others." Valera smiled faintly, a gesture almost foreign to her. "Perhaps then the bond we share will be remembered not as law forced, but as an example of something greater, honor guided by wisdom." And so, the bond that began as obligation evolved into alliance. Elias and Valera walked together, not as victor and bound partner, but as companions, allies, and witnesses to a new understanding. The galaxy watched, and humanity's way, careful, thoughtful, and principled, was recognized not just for its strength, but for the respect it inspired. The customs of Cartel had not been broken. They had been honored, redefined, and strengthened. Humanity had not conquered by force, nor had it intimidated by threat. Instead, it had survived and thrived through intelligence, moral courage, and the ability to choose wisely. For Valera, the lessons were personal as well as political. She had learned that honor could exist alongside respect, that strength could coexist with compassion, and that the rigid traditions of her people could evolve. And for Elias, the journey had shown that even in a world built on rules, combat, and power, humanity's principles could prevail, if one had the courage to act rightly. The sun finally set over Cartel, casting the mountains in shadow. The citadel was quiet, yet the world outside was alive with change. The galaxy had witnessed the rise of a new standard, one in which humanity's approach, brave, principled, and honorable, would be remembered for cycles to come. Elias and Valera stood together, looking out over the horizon. What had begun as a duel, a forced bond, and a challenge of law had become something greater, a bridge between worlds, a testament to choice, and a new chapter in the story of honor among the stars. The galaxy waited, watching humanity and learning that true strength was not only in power, but in courage, wisdom, and the respect one earned through action.